Hello, everyone. It's Charlene Lee, and I am talking today about a generative AI maturity model, which may sound a little bit strange, especially since we are so early in the process of developing generative AI. We're not even a year into it. And yet, I thought it'd be helpful to think about how you could see yourself maturing in this space as you're putting together your strategies. And as I was thinking about this, what I realized is that this maturity model is again not about the technology, but about the strategic adoption of it. The maturity model for this is very different than what we have seen in other maturity models, especially when looking at digital transformation. Now, just a little bit of background: I was the founder and CEO of Altimeter Group, and a lot of the work that we focused on was digital transformation. And I thought I'd show you one of the early works that we did. This is from our 2020 report that we did at Altimeter, which was at that point then a part of Profit. And so the maturity model really started. It's a little hard to see. Let me see if I can make it a little bigger. Um, in the initial stage, you're just making the case with digital transformation. Then you're developing some foundations, typically within departments, and then you're building the operations up. And then you're integrating the platforms, which is really hard to do because you're talking about merging legacy systems. And then finally, you can optimize for growth and innovation. And so this is a typical kind of maturity model, again, that we were seeing. And one of the ideas here is that how is the generative AI journey, that maturity model, different from maturity models that we've seen of other technologies being adopted in the enterprise? And it's really different. So I would love to hear from you as you're joining. Tell me where you're from, and then also where you think you are on your generative AI journey. Are you just beginning in it? Are you really active and using use cases? Are you thinking about this strategically? Do you have a formal strategy at this point? So would love for you to share. And I'm not going to take a poll today, but I would love to just hear some of the places where you all at. So again, please share. And I have one comment here already. We have Jason who's saying, I'm very excited to hear Charlene talking about generative AI. So welcome, Jason. Thank you for joining. I'm glad you're excited. So I want to go through and talk a little bit about why it's different. What is it about generative AI that makes it so different? Well, a couple things. First of all, it doesn't require any sort of centralized enterprise technology for initial adoption. Most of the technologies are now central are on third-party platforms like ChatGPT, Claude. You have Midjourney. A lot of these different models that are actually just accessed through the browser. So to get started doesn't require a huge technology effort on the part of IT. You simply need a browser, maybe pay $10 or $20 a month, and you're off to the races. It also doesn't depend on being able to be retrofitted to any sort of legacy systems. And it's also getting quickly integrated into existing software. We're already seeing it integrated into Google Drive products. We're seeing it at Microsoft with the various agents that are coming out with the co-pilots here. We see it in GitHub with their co-pilot programs. Adobe has it with their Firefly. We're seeing, I think that by the end of the year, we're going to see it much more tightly integrated into existing systems. Salesforce has their entire Einstein AI suite of tools available. And AWS is including it. Azure from Microsoft is including it, building in. So it's going to be very, very easy to literally flip a switch and enable these tools to be available. And then the actual adoption itself is pretty easy. First of all, you can adapt it to existing processes. You don't need to change anything. So I've seen a lot of marketing departments, for example, take these generative AI tools, give it to their marketers to create marketing campaigns, create social media, do copywriting. So the existing processes don't change, but the productivity changes. So new use cases, new applications of these are being applied to existing processes already. It's super quick and easy to learn. And it's easier to develop these applications with a big caveat as long as the data is available. And then finally, the transformational impact on this in terms of productivity and then also in your competitive advantage is so strong that it's very, very compelling. So all of these are adding up to uh, generative AI just being adopted and matured inside the organization at a very different level and different pace. So this is one of the things that I'm very interested in seeing. And so Jay is commenting here. Yes, it is very inductive and universal. It does not have the same boundaries as traditional technologies. Irene is chiming in and saying, yes, this is fantastic. And David is ready and good to go. So let's get into what the generative AI maturity model actually looks like. So I'm just simplifying this into four stages. So let me go show those slides here. And so the four stages are simply being ad hoc, which is where a lot of people are now. They're using generative AI on an ad hoc basis, and it's without a strategic direction. So, oh, I can use it in my sales process to quickly write sales proposals, or we can use it in HR to write multiple types of job descriptions or to go and summarize an entire package into the key points. We're using it in marketing, we're using it in strategy. Leaders are using it to streamline their communication developments. And then you have formalized, where there are more formal projects being put together. So now we have a strategy. We have some specific projects that we think are strategic in nature, and we're going off and experimenting with them and putting them in place. There's a third level where people are thinking, well, these projects need to tie together and they need to be supporting the overall company strategy. So we're going to look at our strategy first and we're going to look for the projects and prioritize ones that are going to influence and really have an impact on our strategy. And then finally, there's innovate. This is where we're going to, from the start, use generative AI to find ways to innovate, to create competitive advantage, to shore it up. And we're going to take a much more than just strategic approach. We're going to think about jumping the shark, so to speak, leaping the frog, leapfrogging and going further. And so I do want to say that these slides are available at bit.ly/Gen AI-maturity-model. So you can go and get the slides there. So, what does this look like in the end? Well, I think one of the biggest issues here is that you can jump all the way. You can start with generative AI and just be ad hoc about it in a very traditional way. Let's go experiment, see what happens. We'll develop the use cases, and then we'll think about developing the right use cases, thinking about how they can apply to the strategies after investigation for a couple months or even a year. Then we'll put together the strategic plan, and then we'll finally, once that's in place, think about ways we can build competitive advantage. You can go all these four steps. But what I'm seeing companies do is they're leapfrogging all the way to innovate. And they're starting from that stage, saying and asking the question, how can we use generative AI to innovate, to have a competitive advantage? How do we think about it more strategically right from the very beginning? Because of all the things I talked about before, because it's easy to implement, there's not a lot of technology you have to retrofit. We can pick these things up. It may not be immediate as fast as using these third party tools, but we can see a path forward and lay out that plan of where we want to be. So let me give you an idea. Let me see and pause and see if there are any other comments here. Mark has a great comment. Let's see here. For enterprises, do they simply wait for AWS, Amazon as the usual suspects to guide them with use and implementation of AI? Can't they sit on the sidelines and wait for solutions to come to them? Absolutely. That's absolutely a great strategy. But the thing is that when the strategies, the solutions come, is it what you're looking for? Are you going to wait for people to show up with those strategies? Or are you going to look at what they're trying to do? Does it match your strategic plans? Can you think about a strategic way to move forward right now to say, I can see already that generative AI could have these impact in these areas. I'm going to go to AWS, go to Google and Microsoft and say, can your technology that you're planning do these things for me? And maybe you can get me part of the way there, but I may have to anticipate building some more custom solutions, and I better start doing that now, thinking about the technology, the data, the people, the organization, the processes that I need to make that happen. Because again, this is not going to happen overnight. And are you going to wait to think about those strategic things when they're available? Are you going to think about it now to say, wow, where are those solutions going to come from? Because they may or may not come from my existing providers. Or if they do, you have a potential to shape the direction of that implementation of these new products right from the very beginning. So, and let me go back to the slides, and I want to show you just an example of how I'm thinking about this model. Let me make these really big. Here we go. Let me say goodbye to that comment. I'll move myself down here. Nope, doesn't work. All right, so we'll just go with this. So, the difference here is the aspiration of where you can aim. What goals do you have in mind? How far are you going to aim out into the future? And if you want to wait, sure, you can wait, but you're going to be sitting at ad hoc for a little while because you're just going to do a lot of experiments. This is what I see a lot of companies today. Next week, I'm going to be talking about how CIOs are approaching it. And most CIOs, like 90% of them, are saying, so, what are the use cases we can develop? I'm not sure about the value of what generative AI can create. So, I really need to understand what the use cases are, see if people are interested in doing it. And my sense is it's pretty obvious that this is going to be a transformative technology. Moving from ad hoc into the formalized space, at least into that experimenting, putting some sort of strategy against it is a really important area to do right now. But you can also start thinking very strategically right now about which use cases would actually be valuable. So, right from the very beginning, you're developing the use cases, you're looking at your capabilities around leadership and culture, around people. Do you have the expertise, the talent? Do you have plans for upskilling? What do your processes look like? How will they change? Do you have the technology in place or through your ecosystems to be able to turn these things on? And then finally, what's the state of your data? And then you can measure the results. And the thing is, my point here is that the further out you can be on this maturity curve, and at least your aspirations, and thinking about how do we think about generative AI? Are we going to think about it only in an ad hoc area, maybe a formalized area, because that's all we're comfortable with? Are we going to stretch our view and say, how can these technologies be used in a strategic way to identify what the big bets are going to be, what the big threats are going to be. And then what I call the no regrets, the places where you're going to have no regrets about just putting it in place because it's going to be such a productivity gain. So this is one of the things that I think it's so important to think about. The way that we think about the maturity model and how we adopt this and how we plan for the rollout and development of our generative AI strategies is going to be very, very different than how we have ever thought about any other enterprise technology, its deployment and its adoption. It is just a very, very different animal. And Jay here has a really good point that real world analogies would be the pandemic planning and broadband rollout. Setting up framework for decision making and issue resolution is going to be very different when you're thinking about some of these things. And Dr. Luigi here says, Farina says AI is going to change everything. I couldn't agree more with you, Luigi. And I think one of the things that we're looking at here is uh, we're looking at a sea change in terms of how this is going to happen. So I want to give you another example of a company. So and this is one company that I talked to, and this is typically where they are. They already know they want to have a formalized AI strategy, but they don't feel comfortable yet thinking about the strategy, the strategic direction of it, or how it's going to tie into strategy. They just haven't had that discussion at the corporate executive level. And so they're thinking about use cases. They're still developing on a ad hoc basis. The leadership and culture is starting to think about, hey, we want to be more strategic about this. So they're almost at that point. They're getting ready to have an offsite and talk about their generative AI strategy as a leadership team and as a board. So they're starting to move into that area, but they're not quite there yet. They know that their people and their expertise that they have isn't there. They know that the processes are backwards. The technology they feel is pretty good. They have some agile practices in there that they feel they could move very quickly into formalized experiments and projects against a formalized plan. They know that their data is in really pretty good shape. They could use it immediately. So the results are still in the ad hoc basis, but they're moving very, very quickly into a formalized space where they want to be. So that's one example of a company that I think is doing a pretty darn good job moving forward, trying to be more strategic. And the key thing is that the leadership and the culture is already tuned to wanting to be strategic in their use of their generative AI. And so one of the things that I think is doing that, let's see, Jay Bryant. I just want to just put out an example. He's shared in the comments here. There's example of some of his first projects experimenting with AI. So he has a blog about this. Jay, thank you so much for sharing that. And Jay just shared that he's using AI in strategic planning and help with their persona development, especially for their operations and the user experiences. Using personas has really helped with my prompts. And again, you have some examples here of how to share that. And again, I've mentioned this in the past, but using context and personas in the prompt itself can really help. Claude 2, for example, has you can put like thousands and thousands, I think 75,000 characters into its prompt. You can load basically my last book I could upload and actually have it run information off of it. But the more information you can give that the AI tools, the more context you can give it, the more specific you can give it. You are a shopper in this area with these kinds of motivations, etc. Then it can give you some solutions and the answers very much based on that particular issue. So this is about prompt engineering and using these again in a much more strategic way. So I want to show you also another company that I spoke with. And this is just the way that I was gauging out what their a model looks like. Their aspiration is completely innovation driven. When they looked at generative AI back in December of 2022, last year, just 9 months ago, 10 months ago now, they said immediately, this is going to be game changing. It's going to be highly transformational. We can see that this is going to generate a huge amount of transformation, allow us to innovate in ways we could never have imagined. And then we also could see developing new products and competitive advantage over our competitors, again, by harnessing this technology. So their leadership said right from the very beginning, let's create an AI council, let's put people together, let's think how we can look at this across the entire organization strategically to allow us to build new products and services that would give us an edge up against our competitors. And so they very quickly developed applications and use cases and made sure they started training people right from the very beginning, gave everybody use cases, the technology, put some boundaries in terms of making sure they knew what they could do and couldn't do. They started changing the processes, formalizing them. This is the one area where they said they're still trying to catch up. The technology they understood was in good shape. Their data was in fantastic shape because they were already managing a lot of the data from their customers. And so they used the data as a starting point to think about how they could leverage that data in new and different ways with generative AI on behalf of their customers. And the results are this summer, they rolled out new products and services to their customers that are, again, very strategic in nature and are already just thinking about the next level of activity they can do. They are far beyond just saying, what can this technology do? What are the ad hoc areas? What are the productivity gains? Their no regrets approach to the strategy was if it helps you do your job better, use it. Think about the processes you want, put in the safety protocols, rewrite the processes, rewrite the job titles, just make it happen because this tool is just too wonderful to not use and make sure that happens. Again, this is what happens when you take a very different approach. You're starting from the standpoint that you're going to use this technology to drive innovation, to drive a competitive advantage. So that aspiration is the key difference between the traditional way of thinking about technology implementation and the way that you think about with generative AI. You're able to leapfrog directly into this last stage and start with that and think about your adoption of the technology from a very, very different perspective. So I'm going to leave that there, and just see if there are any other questions or comments. It's taking a little bit to get caught up. And so one of the things I want to go back to here is the existing maturity model that I started with here. Because if you can think about where you want to be right now, the vast majority of companies are still in that very first stage. They're looking at this, experimenting with it. Again, I can't tell you how many people I come up to and say, well, generative AI, is it real? Is it time for us to jump in and get involved? Absolutely, I think it is. Because the productivity gains are so clear for be able to use it in various job descriptions. As I was talking about in a previous live stream about 2 or 3 weeks ago, in planning your strategy, the first thing you want to do is to play defense, meaning you want to put in the policies and the governance, the guidelines, the training of what you can do with these technologies and what you need to be careful about. And so somebody was asking me yesterday, well, so what happens if somebody uses this and the results just aren't that good? I go, I can guarantee you the results aren't going to be good enough for you to take something straight out of these generative AI models and put it in front of a client or even distribute it widely internally. It's again, remember these tools are still really early in their development. Our actual use of these tools is early in their development. So think of it as a really smart college graduate who you can go and assign a task. They come back with some great material, but you know you're going to have to review it before it goes out. And so this human in the loop is so important at this point. But that doesn't mean that you can't start thinking about how to formalize, critique, and be innovative with these technologies. So when people ask, is it too early? I say, no, it may be even too late. Because if you don't use us and you know your competitors are using it, they're getting a competitive advantage. If you don't allow your employees and your team members to use this technology, and most likely they know about it, they've experimented with it, they see their colleagues at other companies using it, and they're going to say, why is my company hamstringing me from being able to be the best that I can be in my job? My company is really well, like, why they'll get frustrated. And you know what happens when people feel frustrated and not enabled to do the job the way they want to? They start looking for other jobs. And in this environment, in this competitive talent space, it's so important to think about what can we give people? How do we trust people to do this, to use these tools? Now, the interesting thing when I talk to organizations is, well, how do we make sure that people are using this correctly? Because they're using third-party tools, they're often these platforms. How do we know that we're using them correctly? Well, that's why those guidelines, the training, the oversight is so important. And people hate this. Technology departments hate this. IT departments hate this because it's not controllable. Again, a key difference between generative AI and the tools that we use, which is why, again, the enterprise applications of these is going to be so important. But I think right now, in this time period, in between when those applications are available and where some pretty darn good third party tools are available, you need to have a bit of trust. In fact, a lot of trust of your people to be able to do the right things, to have the right protocols. That involves training, and it's hard to think about that the success and the risk and the mitigation of that risk and compliance, other things like that, are in the hands of people who have to actually exercise judgment. So this is the hard point right now is if you want to be moving into a more strategic place, into more strategy and innovation, first of all, you have the aspirations for this. And then second of all, because the technology is still evolving, there's going to be a tremendous amount of training and development and trust and agency on the part of your team members who are using these tools to develop them in the right way. But if you can trust them, if you can put the guidelines in place, if you can put those ambitions and the aspirations of what you want to do with this technology and point people in the right direction, the outcomes of this can be so incredibly different. And I would think that you would want to be in this kind of space, have this kind of maturity model scorecard for your generative AI, because this would be amazing to have. And the reason why I'm so confident that this is possible is I've seen this happen now with quite a few companies that I've been interviewing for the book, that they are leapfrogging and thinking about things very, very strategically. And they're asking the questions around generative AI from the very beginning from a strategic standpoint. So the question becomes, how do you want to approach generative AI? Do you want to think about it as piecemeal, as ad hoc, and slowly get into it at the comfort level that you want to have inside your comfort zone, inside of your past experiences of adapting other technologies into your enterprise? Or are you going to understand and accept that generative AI is a very different type of technology? In fact, it's not even a technology issue here. This is much more of a strategy problem. This is much more of an issue of how do you look at your strategy? Are you willing to take a close look at your strategy, understand how generative AI supports it, moves it forward, or it could potentially be a huge threat to it? So that's what I have for today. Thank you, everyone, for joining and also for sharing your comments on things. Next week, I want to talk about how CIOs should be approaching generative AI. And it's very much leading off of this discussion today, which is looking at the maturity model. Because again, I talk to a lot of CIOs, and many CIOs today are being charged with thinking about generative AI approaches because it's a technology, right? And CIOs should know what this technology will do and bring it back to the rest of the organization. And yet, when I talk to the CIOs, they're just at a loss because this doesn't look like anything they have ever approached before. So, I would love to hear if you are working with CIOs, have CIOs, and really think about how you are thinking about this. And send me questions in advance, how to find me through the various social channels. I have one last comment coming here from Jay Johnson. Again, truly appreciate your focus on trust and agency, creating the more brief context for exploration. Such a good point, Jay, that this is much more about the trust and agency that needs to exist. And that if we think about it, the trust and agency, we also think about values. This forms the foundation for ethical and responsible AI. Very rarely do you ever think about technology or about businesses from an ethical and responsibility, from a morals and values perspective. And it is at the center of how we have to use generative AI. So taking that strategic approach, moral approach, trust, agency is so important about how you want to roll out generative AI. Let's see. A couple last comments here. Dr. Luigi again. Love the way you're speaking about Gen AI. It's not just AI, my brain and my emotions. Hope to follow you more in the next events. Thank you so much, Luigi, for joining today. Nicholas really appreciates this too. And we have a LinkedIn user focusing on the strategy as opposed to technology. Thank you for understanding that and reinforcing that. This is a game changer for adoption and application. So yeah, so take this away. It is not just about the technology. It is really about the strategy. It is about the values that you bring, your strategy, the people, the trust and authority and agency you give to them. And we'll talk a lot more about this next week when we take a look at how CIOs can be asking questions and approaching a generative AI strategy, how it's going to be very different. We're going to be flipping the switch on a lot of the ways that CIOs think about this. So encourage you to bring your CIOs to share next week's live stream with people. And again, thank you so much to think about for all of this today. Nicholas, I see you're coming here. It's almost impossible to engage in using generative AI without thinking about the ethics part of the equation. You're absolutely right. I mean, the ethics and the values, especially when it comes to people, is so important. And one of the things that I want to keep emphasizing is that, again, this is a very, very different technology. It is a very different transformational technology that we need to think about in a very different way. So join me next week. We'll talk about how CIOs can do this and in a thoughtful way. If you are a CIO, I would love to hear your questions in advance of next week. And I will see you in a week. Have a great day. Bye bye.